Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dome at Home, the Manitoba Museum's Planetarium Weekly Astronomy Show. I'm your host, Scott Young, the Planetarium Astronomer at the Manitoba Museum, and it's great to be back for another Thursday night. I think I'm going to have to start the pre-show a little bit earlier. It was fun checking in with all the people as they begin to arrive, listening to that funky, all those funky beats that get laid down in the "Please wait for the show to begin" segment. But so many people checking in, I wasn't able to catch up to everybody before we had to start the show. So for those of you that I missed, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We've got a whole bunch of the regulars here, and we've got a few new names as well, which is awesome. We do love to hear where you're watching from, how many people are with you, and things like that. So if you want to throw that in the chat, either on Facebook or on YouTube, we get all that centralized, and that's how we report our attendance numbers. So it's very useful for us. All right, so tonight we were going to be talking exclusively about the total solar eclipse that is happening this weekend from certain parts of the Earth. It turns out that we're going to change course slightly. We're still going to talk about the eclipse, but we're not going to talk so much about future eclipses. We're going to save that for another show because I've got a couple of guests lined up and I wanted to make sure that they could make it. And one of them, unfortunately, is in travel status right now, which might be related to the fact that there's an eclipse coming up. Anyway, we're going to talk about the upcoming eclipse, how you can watch it live stream. Well, perhaps. We'll talk a little bit about when the next eclipses are that we'll see easily from here. But then we're also going to take the time that we excuse me, the time that we saved there, we're going to move it over to Comet Leonard, a nice bright comet that is appearing in the morning sky right now. We kind of knew it was coming. It crept up on me, to be honest. I can't believe it's December already, but it is a binocular object already, and we hope that throughout December it may even reach the point where you can see it with the unaided eye. So we'll talk about Comet Leonard and show you how to find that, as well as all of the other cool things that are going on in the sky, the planets and the moon and the constellations and things like that. So that is the plan. As always, if you have questions or comments, throw them in the chat here. We'd love to try and answer any questions that we have. I can see chat from both Facebook and YouTube, so if I don't catch you, just give me a couple minutes, then drop it in again, and I'll try and get to as many questions as we can as well. All right, good stuff. We got folks from Delaware and North Kildonan and Thompson, Connecticut crew. Hi, Hollis, nice to see ya. Folks out in Nanaimo and in Comox Valley. Hi, Melissa, and lots of folks all across the country. Most of the people are complaining about cloudy skies, and I've got to say, Winnipeg has been pretty bad the last few days. We warmed up. We hit 4 or 5 degrees the other day, positive. And when that happens, you know there's going to be two things. There's going to be wind and there's going to be clouds. And so it was not a very nice day. I'm hoping we get some clear skies maybe onto the weekend. So because I got a brand new little telescope accessory that just came in the mail today, and I want to try it out. So that's why it's cloudy, of course. All right, let's jump into our What's Up in the Sky segment. We'll connect some of these dots here and show you what's up in the sky. The evening sky is still dominated by those 3 planets over in the west. If you go outside after it gets dark, 3 bright planets are lining up in the western sky, the southwestern sky, after dusk. We've got Venus, the brightest and the lowest one, quite unmistakable. It's the first star you will see at night. Actually, I'm just going to rewind a little bit. We can go a little bit. There we go. We'll go at 5:15. It's already dark enough that you can start to see the planets and so on. So we've got that. We've got Venus here. We've got Jupiter, not quite as bright, but quite a bit higher, and that makes it quite a bit easier to see. And then right in between them, almost in a perfect line, we've got Saturn. Now, to be honest, you probably wouldn't notice Saturn if that's the only thing that was there. It's only about as bright as, some of the brighter stars in the sky. It doesn't pop out of the twilight like Jupiter and Venus do. So it's kind of handy that we have Jupiter and Venus to really show the the contrast there of exactly what we can see. It makes it a whole lot easier. Now, when we start looking at what happens over the next little while, Jupiter and Saturn have been kind of in this kind of relative orientation for a while, but they've been slipping downwards towards the sunset while Venus has been sort of moving up this way. So they're coming closer together, and we're actually going to get a point where Venus will actually pass Saturn and Jupiter, and we'll have some conjunctions, groupings of planets and things like that. That's not for a while, but this month we do have some groupings, and they start on the 6th. So if we pop over to our still images here, on the evening of the 6th, the moon enters the scene and pops in just below Venus here. Now for me, I've got trees and buildings and things like that around my house. I can't always see Venus from my backyard, but when I was out the other day, if you're in a spot with a clear horizon, it is actually quite high, and the tiny thin crescent moon will be just below it. So that'll be a really nice sight. The following night, the moon will have moved on in its orbit, and it's going to be over closer to Saturn, and it will be a slightly thicker crescent. The moon will be a little bit more illuminated. This is a perfect time to catch what we call earth shine. The dark side of the moon is actually not pitch black. It's actually slightly lit up by the light that comes from the sun, bounces off our planet, the Earth, and then bounces back to the moon. And it lights up the dark side, the night side of the moon, just a little bit. And you get this beautiful view of a bright crescent and then a much darker gray rest of the moon that you can see. Right in this coming up week is really a perfect time for that. By the 8th, the moon has moved on again. Now we're getting an even bigger crescent, but we've got it over by between Jupiter and Saturn there. On the 9th, you sort of got this curved line of 4 solar system objects all lined up. If you've got a camera, this is the time to take it out and see what you can do with it. I've seen some great pictures with just cell phones. If you can hold it nice and steady and set it for night mode if it's got that or whatever, and take a picture, see what you get. If you've got a DSLR or a digital camera that you can put on a tripod, even better, because often what happens is you need to take an exposure that's more than just a click. The shutter sort of goes click, click. And so in that time, if you're holding the camera and it jitters around or whatever, you get some jiggles and squiggles and things like that. So a tripod is definitely a good thing to use. If you don't have a tripod, you can actually just set it on a table. I've put it on the hood of my car, just leaned up against a mitten. You can do all sorts of things. Just something that gets the camera so that you're not moving it around, that it's as stable as possible. This week will be perfect for catching this little dance of the planets in the evening sky. Now, it's not just planets that's up in the evening sky, of course. There are constellations, there are regular star groups and things like that. And if we go, well, let's just jump a little bit later so it's a little bit darker. There we go. If we look off towards the east, those winter constellations are already up at darkness. We've got the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters star cluster. We've got Taurus the Bull with the V-shaped Hyades. We talked about these last week. Right nearby the Hyades is where the dwarf planet Ceres is. That was our binocular challenge for last week. So that's still a valid place to look. And then connected to Taurus, we have the pentagon of Auriga, the charioteer. The Milky Way, the winter side of the Milky Way kind of runs right up in this area, through that area, through Auriga. So there's some nice star clusters, some nice things for binoculars in that part of the sky. And as the evening goes on, those stars start to rise higher and higher in the sky. We start to see our friend Orion the Hunter. I spotted it just before it clouded over a few nights ago. I got that coming up. I could see Betelgeuse, the nice orange supergiant star. I didn't quite see the belt of Orion, but I could see the top of Orion, and I knew he was coming. So that'll be nice when we finally get that in a nice clear sky. Okay, over in the northern sky, we have the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper is quite low in the evening sky right now, and as the night goes on, it does slowly rotate higher and higher, rising higher and higher in the northeast. If we actually fast forward quite a bit, we go to say, let's see, 3 in the morning or so, the Big Dipper actually gets quite high in the sky and is standing up on its tail. That's an important group of stars to remember. We'll come back to the Big Dipper in a minute because it's the key to helping us track down Comet Leonard. So we'll get to good old Comet Leonard in just a moment. Before we do that, though, we did get some mail this week, and I wanted to get to some of your images. And let's see here. One of them was related to our binocular challenge from last week. Ulrich was out and managed to track down the dwarf planet Ceres. Congratulations with your binoculars. And so it took some meticulous drawing. We had a star chart that we provided, but basically Ulrich went out and drew the view through binoculars and then went out a couple nights later and drew the same area. And you can see here, there are some, repeats. This little group of stars and this little group of stars looks like it's the same, and this one down here and this one down here. But one of those stars, the one that she's arrowed here, has moved. That's Ceres. That's how you know that you found an asteroid. It's the little star that's moved. So well done. That's quite the challenge. And we also got a first-time astrophotographer sent in their image. Melissa was out there for the Lunar Eclipse and had their camera, no tripod, but managed to get this beautiful, colorful photo of the eclipse. That's the one that we were clouded out here till about 3 or 4 in the morning, and then I slept through the rest. Apparently it was nice and clear out west, and you managed to see it. And you really get that red and orange and the delicate shading of the colors there. Even though there's a little bit of shake from having to hold it, it's a great image, and the color is fantastic. So well done, Melissa. We love seeing images, hearing your observing stories, knowing that you're going out and using some of this information. So please send that kind of stuff in. We love to see it. You can hit us on Facebook, you can hit us on YouTube, or you can just email us at space@manitobamuseum.ca. All of that eventually makes its way to me, and I get to read and see all the images and stuff like that. So thank you very much to Ulrich and Melissa for contributing to this week's show. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go on to... that was weird. The theme music started again. Interesting. It's good music. Don't mind listening to it again, but didn't mean for it to happen. Okay. If you want to see something cool in the sky, there's always something cool, but one of the coolest things to see is a comet. A comet is a fuzzy blob in the sky. What it really is, it's an ice ball, maybe a few kilometers across, and it comes from the very edge of the solar system, so far away that we could not possibly see it from Earth. And these comets, there are swarms of them out there at the edge of the solar system, sort of out beyond Pluto, and we call it sort of the ragged edge of the solar system. And there's all these icy bodies out there, some of them only the size of your fist, and some of them all the way up to a few kilometers, or city-sized ones or whatever. These things, we never get to see them unless something happens. Maybe they pass close to another object and the gravity deflects them. Maybe they actually collide with each other and one of them gets knocked in towards the inner solar system. Something happens. Its orbit gets changed so that it comes closer to the sun. And as this ball of ice gets closer to the sun, it starts to melt, and it starts to let off all of the gas and all of the dust that's inside the snowball, and it leaves it behind in a tail. And we call that object a comet. And they can be beautiful objects. They have a tail. They move through the sky. They change almost every night. And so when you're observing a comet, it's kind of like cutting edge discovery. You're seeing that object right then like nobody else has seen it ever before. It's not something that somebody did last week or whatever. It's changing as we see it. It's really a live event. Well, there's a comet. Well, okay, let me back up. There's always a couple dozen comets in the sky. Most of them are way too faint to be seen, even with a telescope. They're so faint. But Every once in a while, you get one or two that are bright enough to be seen in big telescopes. And then occasionally, every few years, you get one that's bright enough to be seen in binoculars. And then if you're really lucky, every so often, one gets bright enough to see with the unaided eye. Well, Comet Leonard is currently visible in binoculars in the morning sky. And this is a shot taken just 3 nights ago. And you see the central part of the comet is deep in the middle of that. It would just be a little pinprick. The actual icy body is so small that it's still invisible. But the cloud of dust and gas around it is big enough that it's lit up by the sun, kind of like a cloud or fog being lit by the sun. And then material is being pushed away from the sun, and you have this tail that stretches off here. And the tail can stretch quite far across the sky. You could see in some comets, I've seen it where it actually stretches all the way across the sky, like the length of the Big Dipper. That's pretty uncommon. Anyway, Comet Leonard is in the sky, and the way that we can spot it right now, it's bright enough to be seen as a fuzzy spot in binoculars. It's getting brighter every day as it comes closer to the sun and closer to the Earth. And there's some suggestion that as it gets closer, it may be bright enough to see with the unaided eye. So I want to take a look at exactly where this is. I've set the sky here for 3 in the morning. 3 in the morning is to be honest, I set it for 3 in the morning because that was when I could fit the Big Dipper and the horizon in the field of view at the same time. It'll actually be better as the morning goes on because things in the east rise up higher. So if you go out at 5 in the morning, this whole section of the sky will actually be up higher. But I couldn't fit that on the map as well. So it's definitely a morning object. And here's our Big Dipper. The arc of the handle of the Big Dipper arcs to Arcturus, which is the bright star over here, Arcturus. And just up above there is where the comet is. Now it moves, an appreciable amount each day, so you have to know sort of where to look for it. It's not so bright that it's just going to jump out at you. You're probably going to have to use your binoculars and star hop to the right spot, kind of like you did looking for Ceres or something like that. There's a zoom in map here that shows, the position with some better stars in the background. There's a black and white reversed PDF of this on our website, and I'll pop the link in there in just a second. But basically, tomorrow morning, I guess I did this the other day, and so that was this morning. Tomorrow morning, it's actually passing very close to an object which is called M3, Messier 3. It's a globular star cluster, which is also visible in binoculars as a little fuzzy spot. So if we have clear skies between 3 and 7 in the morning tomorrow morning, get out and try and take a look at this, because the passage of a bright comet near a bright deep sky object like a star cluster is pretty rare. If you can't do that, there's actually a place in Italy that will be live streaming it. They just happen to be set up so that they will be able to see that. And I think that starts at, that's at 9 o'clock tonight, our time is when it starts. I have links to that on my Scott the Skywatcher page on Facebook, and I'll pop the links into the chat at the end so that you can go and check that out. It'll be fun to watch. I really hope this comet performs as expected. It's always nice to see an object like this. If it gets nice and bright and you can see the tail, it's one of those few in a lifetime experiences. Having said that, sometimes these comets look like they're going to be bright and then they just sort of fizzle out like a firework and nothing. I mean, they're very faint. They can only be seen in telescopes. Famous comet hunter David Levy has always said comets are like cats. They both have tails, and they both do exactly what they want to do, and they don't care what you want. So I think that's sort of apropos. So keep that in mind. You can hope for good things, but don't let your expectations get out of hand. The comet will sort of be visible till about December 9th or so. It's actually moving very quickly, and it will be moving towards the sun. And so what'll happen is by about the 9th, it's actually going to flip over into the evening sky, and it's going to be quite low around where Venus is in the sky. It actually passes very close to Venus later in December. At that point, it might be brighter. So a brighter comet in the evening sky instead of at 5 in the morning, that sounds even better. Oh, excellent. Lloyd has just popped in with the weather. The Winnipeg is forecast to be cloudy for tomorrow morning. Okay, well, thanks, Lloyd. It didn't look good on the forecast that I saw earlier, but I don't know. I think I might set the alarm anyway and get up. It's a rare enough event that I might get up just, to poke my head out and just see if there happens to be a hole in the clouds or something like that. I don't know. Whenever I say I do that, it's really easy at 3 in the morning to convince myself, nah, I'll just stay in bed. I don't know. I'm gonna try. Anyway, this is a great chance to get this. And what you can do is you can head to the Manitoba Museum's webpage, and on our regular Manitoba Skies page in the December section, all the comet information, including the charts and the printable charts and things, are there. So the link is there in your chat. And I'll pop the Ceres map in there as well if you want to still track down Ceres. That's still visible over by the Hyades. So that's always fun to check out. Okay, let's see. Now it is time for...
Cool Space Stuff!
Okay, so cool space stuff. There were a few things that were happening. There were a couple of rocket launches scheduled for today that were going on. And we're getting into that time of the year where the International Space Station is going over southern Manitoba in the early evening. Now, if you're not in southern Manitoba, you can always visit Heavens Above, which is the, let me pop that over here, which is the sort of standard satellite prediction page that I use. You can just type in your location there, and it will do customized charts for the International Space Station and any other satellites that are going over. So that's a useful place. But right now we've got 2 passes per night, one sometime between 5 and 6, and then one about 94 minutes later, because that's how long it takes the space station to go around the Earth. So it's a good time, and you should get out there and check it out. It's even brighter than Venus, if you can imagine that. And Venus is actually at its brightest right now. So I think there's one tomorrow night that is early enough that we should be able to see Venus and the space station in the sky at the same time. So I'll do a little comparison there. But now's a great time to check out the space station. Today they did a spacewalk up there on the International Space Station. They went out and swapped out an antenna and put some spare parts out for the next time they might need to fix things. There's so many communications antennas and Wi-Fi cables and all this kind of stuff running around up there, and eventually parts fail. The space station's been up there it's been inhabited for 20 years already. The first piece went up in, I guess, 1999, and it is well beyond its warranty period. So obviously people are thinking about, well, what's going to be next? Or is the space station going to stay up there forever? Or are we going to get rid of the old parts and put new parts on, or build a new one? What's going on? Those talks are happening. I don't know what the results will be, of course, but there's all sorts of possible options. But regardless, in the interim, astronauts are keeping that orbiting science station functional. They're doing all sorts of scientific experiments and things like that on board. And we can still see it in the sky. So that's all I need for now. And let's see. Now I think it's time for us to get to our featured presentation. Here's the thing about solar eclipses. Solar eclipses are, without a doubt, one of the most beautiful of nature's spectacles. I have seen 2 of them in my life so far. Some of you that have listened to the podcast to the show long enough probably have heard my origin story in grade 3, where I got to see the total solar eclipse that came through Winnipeg, and that was the moment I decided I would be an astronomer. Back in 2017, I drove down to Nebraska with my family to check out the solar eclipse that went across the central United States back then. And I'm starting to think about the next eclipses as well, of what we're gonna do for those events. But it really is an amazing sight. So much so that people that are able will travel all over the world to see these things. They won't be content with seeing the ones that come near them, but they will travel to Europe or Asia or Africa or South America or wherever to visit, to see these things. And it really is a brief event. The total phase of an eclipse only lasts minutes. I think the longest possible is something like 8 minutes. So imagine traveling all over the place to see something that lasts 8 minutes at the best. Actually, the one that is happening this weekend, 44 seconds of totality. Now that's definitely worth it if you just have to walk down the street, but this particular eclipse is not visible from down the street. There are no streets anywhere that this eclipse is visible. In fact, in most of the eclipse path, there is no land. The eclipse path is right around Antarctica. This is an animation from NASA that basically shows that's the shadow of the moon being cast on the Earth. The daytime side of the Earth, of course, is lit up, and the nighttime side is dark, so you can't see the sun then. And so you have the shadow that sweeps across Antarctica. If you're in the big gray circle there, you see a partial eclipse. You don't see the total thing. You just see a partial eclipse. And partial eclipses are relatively common. We get them every few years or so in a given location. But the total eclipse, you have to be exactly in that little dark spot right in the center of that shadow. And you can see that thing basically does not, it pops into the Atlantic Ocean between the Falkland Islands and South Georgia, goes down to the Antarctica, passes near the South Pole, and then back off into the ocean. Well, okay, and here's sort of the pathway. If you were standing at the place of greatest eclipse, the place where the eclipse lasts the longest and is the best, 44 seconds of totality. And that place is right on the edge of the ice shelf of Antarctica. I think if you're going on an eclipse trip like this, you're probably going as much just to see Antarctica as you are to as you are to see the eclipse. I was hi Abdul, nice to see you. Our friends Jay and Judy Anderson are in Antarctica right now, and they're off to see this eclipse. Jay has been an eclipse meteorologist for, I don't know, 2,000 years, something like that. He is literally the world expert on predicting the weather during an eclipse. And so he does all of the predictions a year in advance, 2 years in advance, and a lot of the tour companies basically have fights over who gets to take him along. So he and Judy are off on that. That's one of the reasons that we're not talking to eclipse people right during this show, because I didn't realize they were actually making the trip to Antarctica. It's quite a trip. So we will see. We'll hear from them once they get back. Here's a close-up. If this helps you, if you know your Antarctica, here's the South Pole, and along here is the path. And it turns out that in the path of totality, or very close to the path of totality, there is one place that is publicly accessible. There's actually a mountaineering camp that is privately run that is close to what's called a blue ice airstrip. It's a place where the ice is level enough that you can actually land airplanes on it. And it's near the Union Glacier. And so there's this big glacier coming out of the mountains there. And that's where it's likely those are the only humans that will see this total solar eclipse. There'll be lots of penguins that see this total solar eclipse all across that path. And there will be a couple of airplanes that are flying out of Chile that will fly out into the path of the eclipse, and you'll watch it through the window, and then you'll fly back home. Apparently there's some bad weather, and some of the eclipse cruise ships that were going to cruise off the Falkland Islands had to cancel. I know a few people got stranded in Buenos Aires and didn't have a ship to go on. So basically they flew all the way to Buenos Aires and then found out that their ship was canceled and had to come home. So that's disappointing. And that's the way that eclipses go. When you go all the way across the world for something that lasts 2 minutes, if it's cloudy that 2 minutes, it's, you miss it. And that's just the way it is. Needless to say, the rest of the expedition must be amazing. So here's Union Glacier Camp. Here's your 5-star accommodations. Tents. They are designed to withstand the Antarctic wind, which often gets up over 120 kilometers an hour. And this is where you would stay. So there are people there right now that are basically getting ready for their eclipse. And they're probably flying out from Chile to this site right about now, actually. And the eclipse is very early Saturday morning, like about 1 or 2 in the morning our time. So it's quite an interesting thing. NASA will be live streaming from that site. I did not expect that we would see any live streams of this particular eclipse because of the remote location, and we still might not. I mean, you're talking satellite internet, and it's quite unreliable, and we might lose the feed or whatever. But if you go to nasa.gov/live, you will hopefully be able to see that eclipse, which would be pretty cool. So a total solar eclipse, definitely worth traveling for. I'm not sure I would travel for this one myself. I know that just getting from Chile to Antarctica was a $40,000 US ticket per person. And you still had to get all the way down to Chile. So, that makes it a little difficult for some of us to go. There are other eclipses that are closer, and so I'm gonna wait for those ones. For Manitoba, we've got a couple of total lunar eclipses next year. Now, lunar eclipses are great. They're wonderful. They're not one of nature's grandest spectacles. They're really cool. They're definitely better than the average thing. But, if a total solar eclipse is a 10, maybe a lunar eclipse is like a 4 or a 5. And a regular starry night is like a 1. Sort of, if that's your scale. We do have a partial solar eclipse coming up in October 2023. Here we'll get about 50% of the sun covered. Now that's interesting, but you still don't get to see that corona, that blue fire, ring of fire kind of thing. For that, you have to wait until 2024, and then you have to drive down to basically a line from Texas up through the eastern United States, up over the Great Lakes and into Nova Scotia. So it crosses near Toronto. In fact, I think about half of Toronto is in the eclipse path and half of it is outside. And that'll be your next opportunity. Now, I do have to say, April in the Maritimes is probably not your best chance for clear weather. If you're thinking about seeing this and you want to guarantee clear skies or have a better chance, you're probably thinking about driving south to Texas. At least that's the initial weather stuff. We'll do some more stuff on this eclipse probably later on in the year. Often everything from hotels to campgrounds and things like that in an eclipse path get booked up a couple of years in advance. So now's the right time to start thinking about, if you want to drive for that eclipse, where you want to be, who you want to go with, how you want to go, and so on. Because, like I say, it really is amazing. I can still remember the 2 minutes that I saw of totality when I was 8 years old. I don't remember very much else about being 8 years old, but I remember that view out through my parents' window, seeing the solar eclipse. So if you have the means to travel, definitely worthwhile. Or, of course, for those of you not in Winnipeg or in southern Manitoba, maybe there's an eclipse near you that's closer. Maybe you're closer to the center line of the 2023 eclipse. You'll have to look around. And NASA has, if you Google NASA Eclipse, they have a whole list of all the eclipses for the next couple hundred years. So you can certainly plan in advance. All right. The show has gone... is almost over at this point. We managed of the bits and pieces in. We also have the opportunity to answer a few questions. We've been cutting question periods short the last little while because I just go on and on and on. So I'm going to leave some time here for questions. Let me just scan this thing here. Let's see. Elaine was asking me the link. I'm not sure which link you were talking about. Was it the? Maybe it was the NASA link for the eclipse. Elaine was also asking about buying really good binoculars. Can I make some recommendations? I absolutely can. So binoculars are one of the rare things in the universe that you literally get what you pay for. There's not many that are like overpriced. There's not many that are so bad that they're not worth the money. Like if bad ones are going to be very inexpensive and good ones are going to be more expensive. I just see Abdul has popped in a couple of suggestions there. Bushnell is a pretty reliable brand. The Legacy 10x50 binoculars. There's also a 7x50 model, I think. I personally prefer the 7x50 because the 7 is the magnification, and 7 times magnification is only 7 times the jiggles that with my arms. 10 times is a little bit too much, and I can't form the image very well. So I have to put 10 times magnification ones on a tripod personally, but Abdul has better arms than I do, actually, so he could probably hold them steady. The 8x42s are also pretty nice. To be honest, any pair of 7x50 binoculars is going to be pretty good. One of the things that you can do is if you go to a store, ask to take them out of the box and take a look at them and look at something down the way. You want to make sure that the two lenses are actually sort of lined up with each other. They're not off at an angle or something like that, because that'll give you a headache. And you also want to hold it. I don't have a pair of binoculars here, but I do have a little telescope. You want to see there's a lens down in the front there. You want to hold it so that light is reflecting off of that lens and you can sort of see the little reflections on the inside there. And you want to see some kind of color on that, either a greenish or a purplish or magenta kind of glow to that reflection. That tells you that those optics are anti-reflection coated or multi-coated, and that will really help at night. In the daytime, if things have like reflections or fringes around them or things like that, it doesn't matter because everything's brightly lit. But when you have a bright star with a black background, if that star actually has a reflection around it, it will really drive you nuts. So you want to make sure that those are really as nicely coated as possible. And they'll usually say fully coated or fully multi-coated. Nikon also has some good binoculars, Abdul's saying. A lot of them actually wind up being made in the same couple of factories and are just rebranded in some ways. Not the Nikon ones. I think they have their own factory. But a lot of the other binoculars, you'll see different names on what is essentially the same binocular. So unless you're paying for really, really top of the line binoculars, like thousands of dollars, you're probably going to do pretty good with almost anything you can get. For astronomy, one of the key things is, and this is a little bit of a math thing, you don't want the magnification to be too close in size to the second number, like 10 by 50. 10 and 50. 50 is the diameter of the lens. 10 is the magnification. They're, 10 times 5 would be 50. That's okay. You wouldn't want to have 50 by 50 binoculars because that would actually be magnifying so much compared to the amount of light that you're bringing in that the image would be too faint for you to see. You really want to make sure that if your magnification gets bigger, the lenses themselves also get bigger, at least for astronomy. Jennifer has 20 by 60 Russian Navy issue binoculars. Wow, those would be nice. Particularly on something like the moon or Jupiter or something like that, something nice and bright. Wow. I've got a pair of the 15 by 70s that a bunch of people, they were on sale at Canadian Tire, and we sold out all the stores in Winnipeg based on this show, which is kind of cool. You can get 20 by 80s as well, which are really nice. I've seen those at London Drugs and at Canadian Tire, places like that, and they're perfectly good. So I hope that helps you a little bit there, Diane. Melissa, actually Linda is asking if I can explain comet tails. Are there always two tails, and are they specific per comet? So everything is specific per comet. No comet behaves like any other comet. There's always some kind of differences, whether it's physical differences or whether it's the angle that we're seeing things in. Because, of course, we've got the sun, we've got the Earth moving around, and then we've got the comet moving around. And depending on where they're all oriented, we're seeing the comet at different angles. So you have basically a snowball, the comet, and you have a heat source, the sun, and it is blasting heat off, and it's melting this comet, and the pressure of the sunlight is actually pushing all of the dust away. So there's actually a tail that points away from the sun. That one's called the ion tail. It's made out of very light particles, essentially, and it points pretty much directly away from the tail. Then there's the dust tail. The dust particles, I mean, a piece of dust is really small to you and me, but compared to an ion, it's quite large. And so the dust actually gets blown kind of away from the sun, but also it gets affected by the motion of the comet itself. And so it sort of sweeps away from the sun in usually kind of a curve, and often it spreads out. The ion tail is very, very thin, like a line, and then the dust tail was spread out in this nice curved fan. And then depending on what angle we're looking at, we might be looking at it from the side and we see the tail beautifully along. We might be looking at it sort of going right away from us, and so the tail is actually pointing towards us, and so we don't really see much of it at all because it's all foreshortened in the angle. So it is definitely a variable kind of thing, and that's part of the magic of comets, is that they never look the same. And sometimes you get a bright tail, sometimes you get a faint tail, sometimes in the coma, the cloud around the nucleus, you can see waves or jets or things like that in high resolution images. There's always something really cool. Oh, hey, I just noticed Stan Runge has joined the discussion. Hey, Stan, nice to see you. One of the things that I'd actually like to really do a whole binocular session on this show, because there's so much about binoculars in terms of tips and tricks and things like that. Stan is pointing out that there are ways to mount your binoculars on a tripod. Like the ones that I bought, they came with a little clamp, and that sticks on the binocular, and then that sticks onto the tripod. It's actually not that great. It kind of flexes around a little bit, and the eye holes are basically right where the tripod is. So to put your face in there, if the binoculars are pointed up, you have to sort of put your face inside where the tripod is, and it's really uncomfortable. So there are some sort of cantilevered lever things and counterweights where you get this sort of like a stick that sticks out, and the binoculars are mounted on that, and then the tripod's down over here. And there's some really interesting and complicated but elegant solutions to doing that. So yeah, I do want to talk about that, Stan, and I'm going to call you, and we're going to figure out a time that maybe you can join me on the show to chat about that, because you've been doing observing since I was a kid. Stan is one of the guys in the Astronomy Society, the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. When I joined as I was 15 or 16 or whatever, he was one of the guys that was there and said, hey, welcome aboard. What are you interested in? And so we've been friends ever since, and I've learned a lot of what I know about actual observing out under the stars from Stan. And he's got a great set of eyes for, and he likes comets too. So we've got that sort of that similarity. So let's see. There was some discussion about cameras. Cameras are optical systems designed to put a chip at the back instead of your eye, but they are basically a little telescope. If you've got a camera, you've got a telescope. You just can't look through it. You have to take pictures with it. Learn your camera manual, like dig out the manual and figure out what when you set it on M for manual, how do you make it work? How do you change the exposure time? How do you set the F ratio and the ISO of the sensitivity of the chip? Learn how to do that, and you can do some amazing imaging just with a camera on a tripod. In fact, some of the best images that I've seen have just been a camera on a tripod and really properly exposed and properly processed. So it's the chat is starting to liven up there. I see Kevin is there from Yorker again. Nice to see you, and hello to Kim as well. The great thing about the Astronomy Club, the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, every year they would have this. Back in the old days before the internet, every year they would have a convention in one of the centers across the country in the summer, and everybody would go there for their vacation, and we'd all hang out, a whole bunch of amateur telescope users, and there'd be like formal presentations and papers and that kind of stuff, and there'd be business meetings. But then there would be just the hospitality suites where you would sit down with somebody in Newfoundland or Vancouver or Tuktoyaktuk or wherever, and just talk astronomy. It was awesome, and I've met so many great friends through RASC. They're a local club. They're also a national club. If you're interested in astronomy, they're a great resource. They have an observatory. They have telescopes in their lending library. They've got a bunch of great people like Stan and Kevin and all those folks that can help you out. You really should look them up and check them out. rasc.ca is the national website, and from there you can find all your local stuff. Steve has suggested a telescope workshop. We will do another telescope workshop. We did one early in the year. I think it was sort of just, actually it might have been almost a year ago, like how do you make your Christmas telescope work kind of thing. So we'll probably do another one of those. We love to hear suggestions for shows, ideas for content. We love to see your images. We love to see all that kind of stuff. So as always, you can send us information through our, there we go, through our links. You can hit us through Facebook and YouTube, space@manitobamuseum.ca if you prefer email. You can even write to us, send me a postcard at 190 Rupert Avenue at the Manitoba Museum, and I would be happy to write you a real paper letter back too. But like I say, we love to hear from you. Next week, we will be taking a look at the upcoming Geminid meteor shower. The best meteor shower of the year happens in December, and it's cold all the time, so almost nobody sees it, but it really is a great shower. We're going to be live streaming that event. But we'll talk about it next Thursday, and hopefully we'll also have some updated pictures of Comet Leonard, because I'm really hoping to get a chance to see that. One more question here just as we roll over to the credits, so we wrap up. Linda is asking, seeing Saturn and Jupiter in a telescope is on my bucket list. Where can I do that? Well, there are a couple of ways to do it. Unfortunately, with COVID, people haven't been doing in-person observing sessions very much yet, because getting people's eyes close to the eyepiece is not a great idea. But there have been some video opportunities and things like that. And I think that coming up probably, let's see, they're setting in the west. So probably by the time summer comes around, we'll be able to do public events. And if you're in Manitoba, we'll be able to, the museum will have some events. If you're not in Manitoba, your local RASC center will probably have an event, because when Saturn and Jupiter are visible, that's a great time to take telescopes out to the public. So that will be coming. So yes, thank you all for joining us. It was a great show. Great to talk to all of you. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure that you fill out our little survey. We did update it, so now the link works again, and you can tell my bosses whether I'm wasting my Thursday nights or not. And we love to hear the stories of you guys going out and learning the sky. So remember, the sky belongs to everyone, as Helen Sawyer Hogg used to say. And so go out. Claim your stars, learn them, get to know them, and we will see you next Thursday here at 7 Central on the next episode of Dome at Home. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.